Lane Kiffin is definitely into talent acquisition and has Ole Miss near the top of the transfer portal rankings. So plenty to talk about with the Rebels. We got Zach Morith on the line from the Rebel Walk. Check out Zach's work right there. Zach, how we doing today?
Good, Mark. Ready to get after it.
You just mentioned me, Derek Nix, 16 years at Ole Miss.
Yeah.
So he's staying in division, although those won't be a thing going forward, but staying in the SEC.
For sure.
Better opportunity as offensive coordinator at Auburn, and now Ole Miss has to fill that void.
Yeah. So obviously the second it happened, Ole Miss fans are freaking out, talking about who's going to replace him. The first name that came to mind for the majority of fans is Jacob Peeler, who's the current wide receivers coach at Missouri. Peeler was at Ole Miss, the wide receiver coach when A.J. Brown and DK Metcalf were there. So obviously fans are going to attract to him right away. I don't see much happening there. I think he's pretty locked in with Eli and Mizzou. They have a really good thing going. You got Luther Burton. I don't see him leaving, but again, just a name that fans are going to attract to right away. And then one that's kind of come up more recently is Michael Spurlock. He played at Ole Miss. He played in the NFL. He was the wide receivers coach at Western Kentucky. He was also an analyst on the 2021 Ole Miss team. So he does have a relationship with Lane Kiffin. And right now he could potentially be the favorite, but there haven't been many updates in regards to it. But again, like I mentioned, Mark, I would expect a decision to happen over probably the next 2 days here.
I mentioned the transfer portal off the top. Marion Walker out of Michigan is the latest addition and didn't necessarily become any kind of star at Michigan, but certainly that was forecasted for him. He's a freak of an athlete.
Yeah.
And so, of course, he's been well coveted. Logan Diggs, pretty productive running back at LSU. And so this has obviously been the path, the route that Lane Kiffin has carved out in regards to trying to make this an SEC championship caliber program.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned it, Logan Diggs. Quinshon Judkins left. There was a lot of smoke there. I don't really know the true story, but regardless, he left to go to Ohio State. And so you can't really replace a guy like Quinshon, but you can try your best to get a group of players who are going to kind of match his productivity. So you get Logan Diggs from LSU. I think he's a lot better than the stat sheet says. He only rushed for about 650 yards, but he was playing in an offense where Jaden Daniels is rushing more than him, and he's throwing to Malik Neighbors. He's a Heisman winner. So get him in the Ole Miss offense and mixed into their running game. I think he's going to have a fantastic season. And then you mentioned it, Amarian Walker, freak athlete. Never bloomed really at Michigan like people would expect him to, but it's a new start at Ole Miss. I think Pete Golding is going to use him efficiently. I would expect him to blitz a lot. He's really fast, and he's 6'4". There are not many defensive backs that are 6'4". You can line up against tight ends. You can line up against the biggest wide receivers. I think he's going to be a really efficient part in this 2024 defense for Pete Golding.
Walter Nolan, of course, the prize of the class. I see a lot of other names that are familiar to college football fans. Key Lawrence was a prominent player at Oklahoma. Juju Wells made plays at South Carolina. So just your rundown of the class and where it stands, and if you can foresee them going after anyone else, whether that's a particular player or whether that's a position need.
Yeah, for sure. You said it. You mentioned Walter Nolan. This defensive line class is shaping up to be one of the best in the whole transfer portal, but I don't think they're done yet. I think they're potentially after Jaheim Otis out of Alabama. He was out of the 2022 class. He's a Mississippi native. It was Ole Miss and Alabama basically going down until signing day, trying to get him. Fantastic player. Pete Golding obviously coached at Alabama, has connections there. So I know for a fact they're going to go after him as hard as they can. And then another guy is a defensive back out of Alabama, Trey Amos. He's visiting Ole Miss this weekend, I believe. And again, the Pete Golding ties, I would probably expect him to commit to Ole Miss this weekend. They're going to go all in for him. Lane was in Tuscaloosa yesterday. So those are probably the biggest two names to watch out for. And then one more here, is BJ Green. He was a defensive end at Arizona State. He entered the transfer portal, committed to Washington, but Ole Miss recently lost the commitment of a defensive end already in the transfer portal from Tennessee. So I would expect them to start pursuing BJ, who could enter the transfer portal again and leave Washington to go to Ole Miss.
Zach Morath joining us to talk Rebs. And of course, Ole Miss with a New Year's 6-day win over Penn State, finished in the top 10 in the country, 11-2 season. And that was the first 11-win season in like forever.
Yeah, school history right there.
Yeah, and people disregard the bowl games, and I know that there are opt-outs, and of course, Penn State certainly had them. Ole Miss did as well, and it was a game that was a really good football game for a half. Ole Miss certainly was extremely impressive in the second half, so there's got to be a sense of pride there. It's still a New Year's Six win. If the team doesn't win that game, they don't finish anywhere close to the. Well, I shouldn't say anywhere close. They don't finish in the top 10, and so certainly that's a status point to say we're a top 10 team. We won a New Year's Six game. So significant win for Ole Miss.
Yeah. If you don't win that game, I think heading into next year, you probably don't see as high of a rank for the preseason ranks. So I think that game actually had a lot more importance to it than people thought on the surface. And I'm impressed by Lane Kiffin for just being able to retain. I think we had one opt out and just hitting on the message that we can make school history, we can get the most wins, and the players bought into it, and you saw that on the field. Penn State's a really good team. They were the best defense in the country by far, and I'm pretty sure Ole Miss put up about 500 yards of offense. I was honestly taken aback because you hear all these things about Penn State. They played well against Ohio State and Michigan, and Ole Miss went into the Peach Bowl and simply did a fantastic job. But I think heading into next year, you add this transfer portal class, you could be looking at a top 5 preseason rank here, Mark.
Absolutely. And the 2025 recruiting class doesn't factor into that. Nobody is committed yet. Are there any particular targets that you're looking at that could be making decisions at some point soon?
Yeah. So there are a couple guys here. One of the main players that I want to target is Andrew Maddox. He's a defensive lineman out of Oak Grove High School, which is in Mississippi. His brother Anthony is a quarterback in the 2024 class who's coming to Ole Miss. His father also played in the NFL, but he also, I believe he played with Pete Golding in college. So there's definitely some smoke there. I watched both Andrew and Anthony play. They're fantastic players. They bring a lot of pride from the state of Mississippi. And I do believe Ole Miss will land him eventually.
All right. Anybody else?
Nothing else, Mark. Just obviously this weekend, got to pay attention to the transfer portal stuff. Just very interesting. Ole Miss lost three players to Louisville, which was I was kind of surprised, but they had 2 players from Tennessee and a transfer from Illinois. They were all committed to Ole Miss and recommitted to Louisville within the past 10 days, which good for Louisville, I guess.
Folks, we got an SEC channel. So please check that out. If you're watching on the main channel, the link's in the description section of this video, an SEC channel where you can catch all of our conversations on at the SEC. And we had one today with Ty Hudson from Tusk Talk, Arkansas. So please check that out. And of course, Zach at the Rebel Walk with Ole Miss football, baseball, basketball, and everything else happening with the Rebs. Zach,
Yes.
we appreciate you stopping by.
Thank you so much, Mark. Appreciate it. Have a good one.